Since the start of 2025, the most shockingly unexpected dark horse in global capital markets has been the memory chip industry. And within it, the world's second-largest memory giant, SK Hynix, stands as one of the biggest winners in 2025. SK Hynix's annual profit surpassed longtime champion Samsung Electronics for the first time. Entering 2026, its revenue shattered 50 trillion Korean won, with operating profit reaching 37.6 trillion won, an all-time high. Its operating margin hit 72%, overtaking Nvidia, 65%, and TSMC, roughly 54%, to claim the global top spot. Fueled by this, SK Hynix's market cap soared more than ninefold over the past year, peaking at 118 trillion won, equivalent to $807 billion. Just how hot is SK Hynix right now? Because the company channels 10% of its operating profit into the employee bonus pool with no upper limit, staff bonuses have exploded. Reports say that in 2026, the average year-end bonus per employee could reach 3 to 3.2 million Chinese yuan, roughly 410,000 to 440,000 US dollars. Some projections even suggest it might climb to 6.1 million yuan, around $835,000, next year. With income comes this astronomical. The social status of SK Hynix employees has rocketed overnight. On Korean social media, they are called Lord Hynix. Even an ordinary company work vest has been repackaged as the ultimate dating prop, a pure symbol of status and wealth. A famous Korean comedy show even shot a skit about it. A scruffy middle-aged man walks into a luxury store and gets snubbed, but the moment he unzips his jacket to reveal an SK Hynix uniform underneath, the staff's attitude flips 180 degrees, instantly treating him like a top-tier VIP. Another running joke claims that in Korea's matchmaking scene, Hynix employees will humbly say they work at Samsung on a blind date, and only when they meet someone with a good character will they confess they actually work at Hynix. But as the saying goes, shine in public, bleed in private. For all the glory SK Hynix now enjoys standing at the pinnacle of the global memory industry, the truth is that for most of the past 2 decades, it was struggling just to survive the industry's brutal winters, at times even teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. SK Hynix's rise is not a heroic lone wolf story. It is a tale of being swept along by the relentless cycles of the global memory industry, a story of powerlessness, hidden desperation, and impossible choices made in the abyss. Behind it lies a secret of survival and high-stakes gambling. A disastrous beginning. From birth, Korea's industrial starting point carried a strong imprint of dependency, lacking any real autonomy. In the 1960s, leveraging cheap labor and geographic advantage, Korea became a preferred destination for American and Japanese semiconductor offshoring giants like Fairchild, Texas Instruments, and Toshiba piled in, building the most basic framework for Korea's semiconductor industry and nurturing the embryonic form of its domestic memory sector. This was also the seed of what would become SK Hynix. But back then, Korean semiconductors had zero independent voice. Core technologies, patent barriers, and market rules were all ruthlessly controlled by American and Japanese titans. Korean firms were reduced to bottom-tier supporting actors in the supply chain, trapped in low-value-add links like contract manufacturing and assembly, passively absorbing low-end capacity. They had neither the qualifications nor the capability to break out through independent R&D. When the Korean chaebols Hyundai and LG, then Goldstar, entered the electronics industry, it was merely a routine expansion following industry trends, relying on partnerships with Japanese firms and absorbing technology spillovers. They cautiously accumulated semiconductor production experience, never daring to cross the line for fear of touching the technical red lines of American and Japanese giants and triggering sanctions. In the 1970s, DRAM memory chips became the global tech gold rush, but the market was rigidly fixed. Japan monopolized global memory output, while the United States controlled the underlying core technology. Korean industry circles clearly understood that unless the nation threw its full weight behind it, pouring money into acquiring technology and smashing through the blockade, the local semiconductor industry would forever be trapped at the bottom of the contract manufacturing food chain, permanently crushed by the giants. To break the deadlock, the Korean government launched the Semiconductor Industry Promotion Plan, injecting massive policy loans, leveraging private investment, and building a joint government-industry-academia R&D system. Within a decade, domestic semiconductor R&D spending skyrocketed 100-fold, kicking off a national chip-building crusade. Samsung was the first to bet big, and Hyundai and LG hastily followed. The chaebol semiconductor war of attrition had officially begun. By the 1980s, the global landscape reshuffled. Again. To counter Japan's semiconductor dominance, the United States suppressed Japanese firms through trade and technology measures, instead tilting technology and market resources toward Korea. Riding this wave of geopolitical luck, Hyundai and LG caught up fast, completing technology iterations and gradually filling the market void left by retreating Japanese players. Yet behind this apparent overtaking maneuver, Korean firms' weaknesses were never remedied. They remained technology followers, never grasping the foundational core tech. There were no natural-born giant genes, only a desperate struggle to survive in the cracks. This became the defining backdrop of SK Hynix's entire growth story. A life-or-death gamble. The 1997 Asian financial crisis was the thunderbolt that crushed Korea's semiconductor sector, dragging the entire global memory industry into its darkest hour. The crisis, combined with massive global memory overcapacity, sent DRAM prices plunging over 75% within months, instantly drowning the industry in losses. By 1998, the global memory sector was bleeding catastrophic losses. Not a single company unscathed, wailing echoing everywhere. Western and Japanese giants like Intel, IBM, and Hitachi, unable to bear the weight of the losses, retreated one after another, spinning off or abandoning their memory businesses. For Korean firms, it was an even crueler winter. Hyundai and LG's semiconductor arms suffered colossal losses in the hundreds of billions of won, cash flows near breaking point, factory shutdowns and mass layoffs became the norm. The two chaebol's memory operations stood one step away from bankruptcy. In those days, Korea's semiconductor industry was undergoing a silent massacre. The three chaebols fought in isolation, clawing over the last scraps of survival space in the deep freeze. There was no alliance, only the law of the jungle. The semiconductor businesses of Hyundai and LG looked set to be buried in the rubble, never to rise again. In 1999, these two rivals, pushed to the very edge of the cliff, finally sat down at the negotiating table and resolved to merge all their semiconductor memory operations to survive together, but the bargaining was brutal, with no one willing to yield an inch. Everyone knew the stakes crystal clear: no merger. They die together, merge, and they still couldn't compete with Samsung, just choosing a different posture to await death. Worse still, after the merger, internal factionalism exploded, technology philosophies clashed, and employee morale collapsed. Panic over layoffs and integration engulfed the workforce. Nobody bet on this crisis-forced marriage surviving the winter. The turning point came from a sudden capital strike. That was when the SK Group stepped in. What SK saw was the combined technical base of the two merged companies and the government's ongoing financial life support. After the acquisition, the new entity was renamed SK Hynix. SK Group's massive cash injection dissolved the fatal cash flow crisis overnight, pulling the dying company back from the precipice. But the price was steep. SK Hynix was now labeled a chaebol subsidiary, forfeiting part of its decision-making autonomy and chaining its fate to the SK Group war machine. After integrating technology, production lines, and talent, SK Hynix quickly vaulted to the position of Korea's second-largest memory manufacturer, forming a triopoly with Samsung and Micron. But this was no victory. It was merely a short-term gasp of survival. The global memory market back then was an utter wasteland, littered with countless fallen adversaries. SK Hynix was simply one of the survivors. Its rise was built atop the wreckage of countless bankruptcies, layoffs, and exits. It was this life-or-death ordeal that forged what would become an absolutely pivotal later decision: focus solely on memory, reject diversification. This choice was born from the blood it had shed and the brutal tuition fees it had paid. At the time, no one knew what massive waves this conservative bet would unleash in future counter-cyclical operations, betting your life against rivals. Scanning SK Hynix's entire history, it never possessed top-tier technology that crushed competitors. The core reason it has secured its seat as the world's second-largest memory maker is that it fully digested the cruelest survival logic of the memory industry: Memory chips never pay out on technology premiums, they pay out on cyclical premiums, the spoils of simply outlasting your rivals. The memory industry is intensely cyclical. The ultimate survival creed is expand in the trough, harvest at the peak. But behind this creed lies extreme risk and life-or-death brinkmanship. Every counter-cyclical move is a high-wire dance with the devil. During industry down cycles, SK Hynix refused to cut production, shed workers, or exit. Gritting its teeth, it kept factories running at full capacity, assembly lines never halting. Even when every single chip it produced was a loss, it stubbornly leaned on low-cost, low-price strategies to gradually squeeze the survival margins of overseas competitors. It was betting on just one thing: endure until the cycle reversed, starve out all opponents with weak cash flows, and then feast on the recovery spoils alone. The 2008 global financial crisis became the most brutal trial of this strategy by far. Back then, DRAM prices collapsed 90%, plunging the industry into a production equals losses abyss. Every chip produced lost over $1. SK Hynix suffered an annual loss of 1.9 trillion, its stock price cratered 70%, and cash flow once again neared breaking point as bank repayment demands flooded Hyundai its darkest hour. It was forced to apply for a $560 million emergency loan, shut down overseas plants, postpone investment plans for its Wuxi fab, and gut all non-core operations. Yet even on the verge of annihilation, it never gave up its core production capacity or abandoned the racetrack. Because it deeply understood the merciless rule of the memory game: abandon capacity, and you abandon the track. Once you exit, you are permanently eliminated. Sustained by continuous blood transfusions from the SK chaebol, SK Hynix stabilized its footing. At the industry's absolute trough, it counterintuitively expanded production and suppressed prices, intensifying the industry bloodbath and accelerating the expulsion of weaker rivals. This extreme cyclical war of attrition ultimately triggered a total industry reshuffle. In 2009, Qimonda, Europe's last major memory player, went bankrupt. Europe permanently exited the DRAM space. In 2012, Elpida, Japan's final DRAM giant, collapsed. Japan officially bid farewell to the era of homegrown DRAM. These former titans didn't fall in dramatic technology showdowns, they ultimately collapsed under the crushing weight of continuous losses and ruptured capital chains. The market share they vacated was entirely devoured by Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. The global memory industry formally entered the triopoly era, and SK Hynix had permanently locked in its seat as the world's second-largest memory maker. Riding the winds of the era, if outlasting rivals through counter-cyclical brutality allowed SK Hynix to cement its seat, then the AI computing revolution that ignited in 2025 delivered an epic structural windfall, creating the capital legend of a 9x stock price rocket. The explosive growth of large language models and AI servers made HBM, high-bandwidth memory, an absolute core hardware necessity. Data shows that the HBM demand from a single AI server is 8 times that of a traditional server. Nearly 70% of global DRAM capacity is now servicing the AI track. The supply-demand gap remains dire, and with capacity expansion cycles taking 18 to 24 months, the shortfall cannot be filled quickly. In this industrial landscape where HBM has no alternative and capacity is scarce, SK Hynix, holding the core production lines, naturally seized pricing power over the entire supply chain. Today, SK Hynix commands over 50% of global HBM capacity and is NVIDIA's most critical exclusive supplier, possessing immense bargaining leverage. It even proactively raised HBM prices by 50%, and NVIDIA had no choice but to fully accept it, with zero room to negotiate. As of now, SK Hynix's entire 2026 production capacity has been sold out, with an order backlog stretching 2 years, directly rocketing its revenue and profitability and creating this stock price miracle. But behind the glamour lie unavoidable lurking fears and deep anxieties. First is extreme path dependency. SK Hynix's business is hyper-concentrated on the HBM track and on a single customer, NVIDIA. The moment AI investment slows, HBM demand cools, or NVIDIA seeks alternative suppliers, it will face a crisis of plummeting growth. And its former glory could vanish into thin air overnight. Second, rival catch-up speed is accelerating fiercely. Samsung is now charging full force into HBM4 mass production, planning to quintuple capacity within 3 years. Micron has completely exited the low-end consumer market, going all in on high-end HBM and enterprise storage. The industry gap is closing fast, and SK Hynix's lead is far from solid. Moreover, its business structure is dangerously monolithic. 70% of its advanced process capacity is tilted entirely toward HBM and DDR5, while traditional memory capacity keeps shrinking, leaving it extremely vulnerable to industry fluctuations. To maintain its technology lead, SK Hynix must keep injecting colossal R&D funds. The moment its iterations lag, rivals can overtake it, trapping it in a vicious cycle where falling behind means elimination. This anxiety has shadowed every step of its development, preventing any real peace even at the highest peaks. More alarmingly, behind the 9x surge is a concentrated release of multiple overlapping tailwinds: the demand explosion from the AI wave, the fat profits from HBM pricing power, and the stability of a global monopoly structure. Only these three stacked together could create this seemingly brilliant mirage. Add in persistent geopolitical turbulence, the US revoked its validated end-user status, meaning its Wuxi plant can only complete process upgrades by shuttling wafers across borders, dramatically hiking logistics costs and production risks. Goldman Sachs predicts double-digit HBM price declines in 2026. This AI-induced industry carnival is, with high probability, just a brief, shining moment in the cycle. A new industry correction is already brewing. The Deeper Quagmire, retracing SK Hynix's complete growth trajectory, it is not hard to see that its rise is the outcome of multiple external forces converging with its own brutal tenacity. Yet the inherent trait of dependency has remained its inescapable core shackle from beginning to end. Its much vaunted counter-cyclical gambling is, at its essence, extreme survivorship bias. From start to finish, SK Hynix has never achieved truly independent growth. This model of rising by leaning on external crutches will eventually exact its corresponding price once the industry matures and the windfalls fade. The global memory industry has never had a stable endgame. Technology keeps upgrading, cycles keep revolving, and the landscape keeps reshaping. No company can forever stand at the center of the storm. The long-lasting triopoly is now quietly cracking. The head-to-head battle among the three giants is entering a white-hot stage. Samsung keeps iterating HBM tech, locking down core clients through long-term supply agreements to defend its share. Micron is concentrating on high-end differentiation, with profitability catching up fast. The three-way technology, capacity, and customer war is escalating